The polar bear, scientifically known as Ursus maritimus. Polar bears are specifically adapted to survive in one of the harshest climates on Earth, the Arctic. They are formidable apex predators of the Arctic region, where sea ice is both their home and hunting ground. Their survival and lifestyle are intricately tied to the seasonal dynamics of the sea ice and the wildlife that it supports, most notably seals. The health of the polar bear population is closely tied to the health of the Arctic ecosystem, which is currently facing significant threats due to climate change. Polar bears are the largest land carnivores, with males reaching up to 10 feet in length and weighing between 900 and 1,500 pounds. Females are smaller, typically weighing 400 to 700 pounds. Their massive size and strength are key factors in their survival in the harsh Arctic conditions. The size allows them to store large amounts of fat, which provides energy during periods when food is scarce, especially in the warmer months when sea ice retreats and hunting opportunities become limited. The polar bear's fur is a key adaptation to life in the freezing Arctic. Its fur, which appears white, is actually translucent. This adaptation helps polar bears blend into their snowy surroundings and also allows them to reflect sunlight and reduce heat absorption. Underneath the outer layer of fur, polar bears have a thick layer of insulating fat, or blubber, that can be several inches thick. This fat layer is crucial for keeping polar bears warm in temperatures that can plummet to -40 degrees Fahrenheit or -40 degrees Celsius. Additionally, their paws are uniquely adapted to their environment. The soles are covered in dense fur that prevents slipping on ice, and they are large enough to distribute their body weight evenly, making it easier for them to walk on thin ice without breaking through. Polar bears have incredibly large paws, measuring up to 12 inches across, which help with walking on snow and ice. The paws act as natural snowshoes, distributing the bear's weight and preventing them from sinking into the snow. The fur on the soles of their feet provides both warmth and traction. The bear's sharp claws help in gripping surfaces, and the large webbed paws also make them excellent swimmers. Polar bears are found in the Arctic regions surrounding the North Pole. They rely on sea ice, which forms in the winter and melts in the summer, as both a platform for hunting seals and a mode of travel. The sea ice provides polar bears with access to vital food sources, primarily seals, which they hunt by waiting at breathing holes or breaking through the ice to access seal dens. Over the course of the year, polar bears often migrate across the sea ice, traveling great distances in search of food. During the winter, the sea ice extends far from the land, giving polar bears access to large populations of seals. However, as the Arctic warms and sea ice melts, polar bears are increasingly forced to spend more time on land during the summer months, which limits their ability to hunt and causes increased stress on their health. Polar bears are highly migratory, traveling long distances as sea ice shifts and melts. During the summer months, when sea ice is at its minimum, some polar bears are forced to retreat to land where they may fast for months until the ice returns. This seasonal migration can cause disruptions to their feeding cycles and affect their reproductive success. As climate change accelerates the melting of the Arctic sea ice, these seasonal movements are becoming more pronounced, and some polar bears are even being observed on land for much longer than before. Polar bears are solitary animals for most of their lives. They do not form packs or herds like other carnivores such as wolves. The exceptions to this are mothers with their cubs and during the brief mating season in the spring. Adult male polar bears are often solitary and may roam across vast territories in search of food or mates. During the mating season, males will travel long distances in search of females. However, once the mating season ends, they generally return to their solitary existence. Polar bears are highly skilled hunters. They primarily hunt seals, especially ringed and bearded seals. The key to successful hunting lies in their incredible sense of smell, which allows them to detect seals from miles away. Polar bears often hunt by waiting patiently near breathing holes or seal dens, using their excellent hearing to detect when a seal surfaces for air. When they catch their prey, they will often feast on the high-fat blubber, which provides them with essential nutrients and energy. Another hunting strategy involves still hunting, where a polar bear quietly stalks a seal or seal pup and then attacks. Because of their large size, Polar bears do not need to hunt as frequently as smaller animals, but they must consume a significant amount of food to maintain their energy and fat reserves. Polar bears are excellent swimmers and are capable of swimming for many hours at a time. They use their large paws like paddles and are able to navigate through icy waters, covering distances of up to 60 miles in a single swim. They have a thick layer of blubber that provides buoyancy, keeping them afloat while they swim. Their fur also helps in retaining heat during long swims, but when it gets wet, it can lose some of its insulating properties. Swimming is an essential skill for polar bears as they often need to cross open water between pieces of sea ice, especially during the warmer months when sea ice is fragmented. This ability to swim long distances is increasingly important as the melting of the ice forces them to cover greater distances in search of food. Polar bears are specialized hunters, and their primary diet consists of seals, particularly ringed seals and bearded seals. These seals are rich in fat, which provides the polar bear with the energy needed to survive the harsh Arctic environment. Seals are most commonly found in the sea ice, where they live in dens or breathing holes that the polar bear must locate in order to hunt. Polar bears employ different techniques to catch their prey. One of the most effective methods is to wait by a seal's breathing hole. They are highly patient and can wait for hours for a seal to surface for air. When the seal does, the polar bear strikes quickly, grabbing it with its powerful paws. In some cases, polar bears will break through the ice to access seal dens. A seal may dig a den under the snow where it rests and raises its pups. The polar bear can use its immense strength to break through the ice above the den, gaining access to the seals below. This requires great skill and energy, but the rewards are worth the effort. During the summer months, as the sea ice melts, polar bears face food scarcity. Some polar bears can go without food for several months, surviving off their fat reserves. In the absence of sea ice, polar bears may be forced to move onto land, where food sources are limited. This period of fasting can lead to weight loss and diminished health, particularly among older bears or those who have not stored enough fat during the preceding months. Despite these challenges, polar bears are capable of enduring long periods without food. However, prolonged fasting can have serious consequences, including lower reproductive success and reduced survival rates for cubs. Polar bear mating takes place in the spring, typically from March to May. During this time, male polar bears actively search for females to mate with. Males use scent marking, vocalizations, and tracking to find females that are in estrus, the period when they are fertile. Although polar bears are solitary creatures, the mating season causes males and females to interact. Male polar bears may track a female over long distances, competing with other males along the way. Mating pairs typically stay together for a brief period, after which they separate. Mating does not guarantee pregnancy. Only the most successful males will mate with a female who is ready to conceive. Female polar bears undergo delayed implantation, a reproductive strategy that ensures the timing of birth aligns with the best conditions for raising cubs. After mating, the fertilized egg does not implant in the womb immediately. Instead, the embryo remains in a suspended state for several months until the fall, when the female's body conditions are optimal for supporting the developing fetus. This delayed implantation allows the female to time the birth of her cubs during the winter, when conditions inside dens are more stable and when the cubs' chances of survival are higher. After delayed implantation, the female polar bear's pregnancy lasts around 8 months. In December or January, the female enters her den where she will give birth to her cubs, typically twins. Single cubs and triplets are less common, but not unheard of. The cubs are born blind, hairless and tiny, about the size of a human baby at birth, typically weighing only about 1 to 1.5 pounds. The mother remains in the den for several months after giving birth. During this period, she relies on her fat stores to provide sustenance, as she does not leave the den to hunt. She nourishes her cubs with her rich milk, which is extremely high in fat and protein. This milk helps the cubs grow rapidly during their first months of life, enabling them to survive in the harsh environment. Newborn cubs are completely dependent on their mother for warmth, nourishment, and protection. Initially, they stay close to the warmth of the mother's body, as the temperature in the den is freezing. As the cubs grow, their fur becomes thicker and they begin to open their eyes. By the time they are 2 to 3 months old, the cubs are ready to venture out of the den and the family emerges into the Arctic environment. The mother spends the next several months teaching her cubs the skills they need to survive. These lessons include hunting techniques, recognizing potential dangers, and navigating the icy landscape. Cubs are playful and curious, but their survival depends on learning quickly from their mother. By the time they are 1.5 to 2 years old, cubs are ready to become independent, although they may stay with their mother longer in some cases. During the long Arctic winters, female polar bears prepare for the birth of their cubs by digging dens in the snow or ice. These dens offer protection from the harsh cold and wind, and they provide a safe space for the mother to give birth and care for her young. The dens are often dug into snowdrifts, sometimes with additional layers of ice and snow above for insulation. In some regions, polar bears may also use existing dens or caves created by the natural landscape. Mother polar bears do not venture out of the den during the first few months of their cubs' lives. They are entirely reliant on their stored fat reserves for nourishment. The cubs remain inside the den until the spring, when they are strong enough to survive outside. During this time, the mother continuously nurses the cubs, providing them with the high-fat milk they need to grow and thrive. After the cubs leave the den in the spring, their mother becomes their guide and teacher. She takes them on hunting expeditions, showing them how to track and catch seals. The cubs begin to accompany her on the hunt. Although they are not yet skilled enough to catch seals themselves, their mother provides them with guidance on what to eat, where to find food, and how to recognize danger in their environment. In the early stages of learning, cubs are highly playful and inquisitive. They engage in mock hunting behavior, such as practicing their stalking and pouncing. They also learn to be cautious of predators, including the threats posed by humans and other polar bears. Cubs that stay with their mothers for a longer period tend to fare better in terms of survival rates, as they receive more extensive training and are in better physical condition when they finally leave. One of the most significant threats to polar bears is the ongoing loss of sea ice due to climate change. Polar bears rely on sea ice to hunt seals, breed, and travel across vast areas of the Arctic. As global temperatures rise, the ice is melting earlier in the spring and reforming later in the fall, shortening the time polar bears have to hunt and significantly reducing their access to food. With the loss of sea ice, polar bears are increasingly forced to spend more time on land. This means they must travel longer distances to find food, which can lead to exhaustion and malnutrition. During the summer months, when food is most scarce, polar bears may have to fast for long periods. This is especially concerning for mothers who need to conserve energy to care for their cubs. Some polar bear populations have been observed moving farther inland in search of food, but this is not a sustainable solution. The land offers fewer food resources, and the nutritional needs of polar bears are not easily met on land. Human activities such as oil drilling, shipping, and tourism are further threatening polar bear populations. The expansion of industrial activities in the Arctic results in habitat destruction, pollution, and increased human-polar bear interactions. Oil spills in particular pose a grave risk to polar bears, as spilled oil can coat their fur and reduce its insulating properties. It can also contaminate the bear's food sources and disrupt the Arctic ecosystem. Polar bears are also threatened by the illegal hunting of their species, as some regions still allow limited hunting for subsistence or sport. While international agreements have been made to protect polar bears, enforcement is difficult in remote areas, and poaching remains a problem. The ongoing challenges of a changing environment have led to increased rates of malnutrition, lower birth rates, and higher mortality among polar bears. Research indicates that polar bears are losing weight, with some individuals exhibiting signs of starvation. Cubs are particularly vulnerable, as malnutrition during early development can have long-lasting effects on their health. As polar bears are forced to travel longer distances to find food, they expend more energy than they are able to consume. This has led to thinner polar bears, with less fat stored for winter hibernation and less overall energy to survive the lean months when food is scarce. Due to the growing threats, polar bears face from climate change and human activity, there has been a global push to protect polar bear populations and their habitat. Several international agreements and organizations are focused on ensuring the survival of these iconic creatures. One of the most significant conservation measures is the Polar Bear Agreement, signed in 1973 by the 5 polar bear range states: the United States, Canada, Russia, Norway, and Greenland, Denmark. The agreement calls for cooperation between the countries in areas such as research, management of polar bear populations, and the protection of their habitats. It has led to stricter regulations on hunting, as well as the establishment of more protected areas for polar bears. In addition to international agreements, individual countries have enacted national policies aimed at safeguarding polar bears. For example, the US has listed the polar bear as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act since 2008. This listing helps to limit activities that could harm polar bears, such as oil and gas exploration in key habitats. Scientists have been studying polar bears intensively to understand their behavior, population trends, and the impacts of climate change. Satellite tracking has allowed researchers to monitor the movements of polar bears over large distances, providing invaluable data on how their habitats are changing and how they are adapting. These studies have helped document the increasing loss of sea ice, the shrinking of polar bear ranges, and how this affects their ability to find food and reproduce. Genetic research is also being conducted to assess the health of polar bear populations and determine how climate change might affect their genetic diversity in the long term. Such monitoring can also help scientists predict future changes to polar bear populations and assess which areas may require greater protection or conservation action. In addition to field research, population surveys are regularly conducted to estimate the number of polar bears in different regions of the Arctic. These surveys use methods such as aerial surveys, camera traps, and genetic samples to track polar bear populations and understand trends in their survival and reproduction. One of the most critical factors in polar bear conservation is raising awareness about the challenges they face. Climate change, which is causing the rapid decline of sea ice, is not only a threat to polar bears but also to many other species dependent on the Arctic ecosystem. Public campaigns, documentaries such as BBC's Polar Bear Spy on the Ice, and educational programs are helping to bring the plight of the polar bear to the forefront of global attention. These initiatives aim to educate people on the importance of reducing carbon emissions and the need to act in support of climate change mitigation efforts. Increased public awareness has also influenced policy decisions. The more people understand the impacts of climate change on wildlife like polar bears, the more they support global and local efforts to protect endangered species. Polar bears are apex predators in the Arctic food chain. As the largest land carnivores, they have a critical role in maintaining the balance of the ecosystem. By preying on seals, especially young and vulnerable ones, polar bears help regulate the population of these species, which in turn affects the health of the marine environment. Seals are a key component of the Arctic food web, as they are both predators and prey. Polar bears' predation on seals reduces the number of individuals available for other predators, such as killer whales. The hunting habits of polar bears can help maintain the equilibrium of the ecosystem by preventing any single species from becoming too dominant. Furthermore, as polar bears feed on seals, they also contribute to the broader Arctic ecosystem by bringing nutrients to the sea through their waste and by consuming a wide variety of marine organisms that form part of their diet. This nutrient cycling is a crucial part of maintaining biodiversity in the Arctic. Polar bears have deep cultural significance for the indigenous peoples of the Arctic. Many indigenous Arctic communities, including those in Canada, Alaska, Greenland, and Russia, have long revered the polar bear as a symbol of strength, endurance, and survival. These cultures have a rich history of stories, myths, and traditions centered around polar bears, and they have also hunted polar bears for subsistence and spiritual purposes, respecting the animals in ways that reflect a deep understanding of their role in the ecosystem. Polar bears also feature prominently in modern global culture as symbols of the Arctic and the effects of climate change. Images of polar bears, particularly those depicted on ice floes or stranded on melting ice, have become a powerful symbol in climate change advocacy, often representing the broader environmental and ecological crises that are threatening species worldwide. This has helped galvanize public support for policies aimed at reducing carbon emissions and preserving critical habitats. The future of polar bears is highly uncertain, and the species faces a multitude of challenges due to the ongoing loss of their natural habitat. The continued melting of Arctic sea ice, driven by global warming, is the most significant threat to polar bear populations. As sea ice melts earlier in the year and forms later in the fall, polar bears are finding it increasingly difficult to access their primary food source, seals. This loss of sea ice is also forcing polar bears to spend more time on land where food resources are scarce. As the Arctic continues to warm at more than twice the global average, polar bears will likely face further challenges. Predictions suggest that the polar bear population could decrease by 2/3 by the middle of the century if current trends continue. This would result in significant losses for the species, with many bears facing starvation, reduced reproductive success, and the threat of extinction in some areas. While the future is uncertain, there is hope that concerted global action can mitigate some of the threats facing polar bears. If global temperatures can be stabilized and the melting of sea ice slowed, there is potential for polar bear populations to adapt to the changing environment. Continued efforts to protect critical polar bear habitats, reduce human-wildlife conflicts, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions will be essential in ensuring the survival of the species. Efforts to create more protected areas and sanctuaries in the Arctic, alongside the implementation of stronger climate change mitigation policies, can provide polar bears with a fighting chance. The establishment of conservation corridors and the ongoing support for scientific research and monitoring are also crucial components in helping polar bears adapt to the challenges posed by climate change.